Persona has become one of the most popular Japanese RPG series in modern gaming. And I get it, these games are fun, upbeat, oozing style. And I love the way the developers recreate actual areas in Japan in the game. It's freaking awesome. But not everybody knows that Persona is actually a spin-off, derived from a much tonally different series of RPGs called Shin Megami Tensei. And while Persona has completely eclipsed its parent RPG in terms of popularity, Shin Megami Tensei is still around. In fact, the 5th entry in the series is due out on the Nintendo Switch this year, apparently. And I wasn't lying when I said these games are significantly different in tone. Persona you could boil down to being an RPG, time management, life simulator with an emphasis on waifus, whereas Shin Megami Tensei you could consider a horror RPG dungeon crawler. Just the feel of these games, especially the earlier iterations, they're just different. And it deals with some pretty heavy subject matter. Religion, reincarnation, gods. Even the series logo is pretty loaded with symbolism and iconography, bearing a Latin phrase that translates to, as above, so below, written around a hexagram, a symbol seen in the Seal of Solomon, which depicts a triangle intertwined with an inverse triangle, also tying in with the phrase, as above, so below, angels and demons, which has become synonymous with occultism, heavy stuff. And religious and spiritual subject matter is handled with a lot of care and taken quite seriously in Asian cultures. In fact, the development team over at Atlus in Japan, seeing as how their projects so frequently involve horror and the occult, it's a tradition for them to annually perform a purification ritual at a Shinto shrine, called a harai. Members of the team went so far as to jokingly associate the company's near bankruptcy in 2013 with neglecting their prayer during the development of Shin Megami Tensei 4. In an interview with 4Gamer, series producer Kazuchi Yamai was asked about alleged strange phenomena that occurs during the development of their games, where he confirmed the team's hardware would consistently malfunction one after another as if something were passing through them, amongst other strange occurrences. There's reports of all kinds of misfortune falling on the development staff, which in Japan has earned the series a bit of a reputation. In fact, the series is tied to several urban legends in Japan. There's definitely a weight that hangs over these games, due in large part to the themes that they delve into. Shin Megami Tensei was released on the Super Famicom in Japan back in October 1992. A much different RPG than the other popular RPG series at the time. Famitsu Magazine scored the game 36 out of 40, with all 4 reviewers scoring the game a 9 out of 10. It was a huge success for the company. Though a year and a half after the game's release, it came under some scrutiny, as details of a real-life murder in Japan were parallel to events that happened in the game. In western Tokyo, in between all of the urban sprawl, there's a park named Inokashira Park. It's got a zoo, cherry blossom trees, a large pond with rowboats, and of course, the Ghibli Museum. It's a popular destination amongst tourists and locals alike. It's also a setting in Persona 5, as I mentioned earlier. These games feature real-life locations. And of course, it's also in 1992's Shin Megami Tensei. In that game, your character wakes up to discover that their neighborhood has been fenced off by police due to an ongoing investigation. Traveling south, you'll be stopped at Inokashira Park, where you'll learn that the police are investigating a murder that occurred there. Talking to nearby NPCs at the cafe, you'll be informed that the victim was not only murdered, but dismembered. This is in the opening 10 minutes of the game. On the morning of April 23rd, 1994, a worker at Inokashira Park made a gruesome discovery. Placed in multiple plastic bags, human remains, dismembered, methodically cut into 20-centimeter parts, drained of blood, and stuffed into a trash can. Now, this case is bizarre for a number of obvious reasons. I mean, just the nature of the crime is strange, but specifically the cuts in the body were precise and seemingly done by someone with experience. The head and parts of the torso were never found. The time frame in which it occurred was very narrow. From when the person was last seen to when the remains were discovered, they were within 36 hours of each other. And the victim was identified. We'll leave them anonymous in this video, but despite the police questioning thousands of people, to this day, no one has been arrested and the case remains unsolved. So, Shin Megami Tensei released in October 1992, and a year and a half later, fiction seemingly becomes reality. You have a murder, more specifically a dismemberment, in the video game version of Inokashira Park, and then the real thing happens in 1994 in the actual Inokashira Park. And a lot of people may just chalk this up as a coincidence, and they may be right. But it's a hell of a coincidence, especially considering we're talking about Japan, a country with a very low homicide rate, less than 1 in 100,000. And of those homicides, how many of those result in the victim being dismembered? Now, I don't have the stats for that, I don't have the numbers, but you gotta imagine we're talking some pretty small fractions here. And now, there are theories as to what happened to the victim, including someone covering up a botched hit and run, and another being a ritualistic sacrifice. Sounds ridiculous, I know. But of course, one of the early scenes in Shin Megami Tensei is a ritual sacrifice, in which the sacrifice would result in the summoning of a demon lord. Now look, it's a video game, albeit one that deals with the occult. And bear in mind, 80s, early 90s, the satanic panic was a thing, that happened. But whether the killer, the person responsible for this awful, terrible crime, whether they were inspired by the game or not, doesn't matter. It's interesting to see the common threads, sure, but I in no way mean to imply that there's any sense of responsibility that should fall upon the creators. All of that games inspire or cause violent behavior is utter horseshit. The inner workings of the mind of a psychopath is something we don't understand, and quite frankly, neither do they. So, it's easy to see why the series has a history of mysteries, urban legends, haunted development. From the beginning, its inclusion of rituals, sacrifices, murders, and dismemberment almost seemed to manifest itself into reality. But it's also important to keep in mind that all of this is simply speculation based on a series of possible coincidences. At the end of the day, we'll likely never know the motivations behind this crime. Prior to 2010, Japan had a 15-year statute of limitations, which has since been extended to 30 years. The Inokashira Park incident occurred in 1994, meaning that it just missed it. The statute of limitations for this case was passed in 2009, meaning that in all likelihood, no one will ever be charged. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Deep Cuts. As always, please let me know what you thought about it, and hit the like button if you enjoyed it. It does help this channel out a lot. And then binge watch the Deep Cuts playlist to check out stories similar to this one. Thanks for watching this video, guys. Peace.